4 men crossed the line inside 10 seconds. In pouring rain at Scotstoun Stadium in Glasgow, the fastest sprinters across the Commonwealth turned the men's 100-meter final into an absolute war. And by the time the clock stopped, a 32-year-old former goalkeeper from Cameroon had just rewritten a record that had stood since 1998. This wasn't just another final. The men's 100-meter race at the 2026 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow brought together one of the most stacked sprint fields this event has ever seen, and championship racing season had been building toward this exact night in Scotland for weeks. Kenya's Ferdinand Omanyala walked in as the defending champion, chasing something no man has ever done at these games: back-to-back 100-meter titles, and he arrived in career-best form after breaking 10 seconds 5 separate times that season across 3 different continents, calling it his season of restoration after a year hampered by injury. Standing in his way was a new generation of speed. Australia's Lachlan Kennedy, barely into his 20s, had already dipped under 10 seconds multiple times in 2026, though he had never once broken 990 in his life. Nigeria's Kanyinsola Ajayi came in fresh off winning this year's NCAA outdoor title in a blistering 9.72 seconds, a run that ranks among the fastest ever produced by a college sprinter, and he had since gone on to beat reigning world champion Seville at his Diamond League debut in Eugene, Oregon, proving the NCAA title was no fluke. Jamaica sent Ackeem Blake, South Africa sent Gift Leotlela, and Ghana's Benjamin Azamati arrived as the fastest heat winner in Commonwealth Games history after his opening round run. And then there was Emmanuel Eseme. At 32 years old, the Cameroonian sprinter carried a story unlike anyone else in the field. He didn't start competing seriously until he was 24, and before that, he spent his youth playing football as a goalkeeper. This was already his second Commonwealth Games, after reaching the finals of both the 100 and 200 meters in Birmingham 4 years earlier without ever standing on the podium. Nobody watching expected a late bloomer from Yaoundé to be the man who changed everything in Glasgow. Getting to that final meant surviving a brutal set of semifinals, all run in conditions that kept shifting as rain moved in and out over Scotstoun Stadium. Eseme served early notice of what was coming, winning his semifinal in a national record of 9.89 seconds, arguably the standout run of the entire round, given how wet the track already was beneath him. Right behind him, Kennedy and Ajayi both clocked identical times of 9.94 seconds to advance, a lifetime best for the young Australian, and a clear sign that this final was going to be closer than anyone had predicted. Every heat told the same story: sprinters fighting through puddles and swirling wind just to survive to the next round. Spikes slipping on a track that could not decide whether it wanted to dry out. Azamati barely squeezed through as one of the fastest losers across all 3 heats, a reminder of just how little room for error existed in a field this deep. By the time all 3 semifinals wrapped up, 8 men had booked their spot in the final, and every one of them had proven exactly why they belonged there. The rain kept falling as the field walked out for the final, and for a moment it looked like the weather might rob this race of the fast time everyone in the stadium had come to see. Then, just before the gun, the rain finally eased. The track dried just enough for spikes to grip, and the stage was set for something historic. When the gun went off, Kennedy exploded out of the blocks alongside Ajayi. And for the opening 60 meters, the two of them ran shoulder to shoulder, trading the lead stride for stride while the rest of the field chased behind them. Kennedy began to pull away in the second half of the race, and for a brief moment, it looked like the young Australian was about to steal the biggest win of his career in front of a roaring Glasgow crowd. But out of nowhere, Eseme came flying through the final 30 meters. The Cameroonian had run the whole race from behind, patient and controlled, saving his strongest gear for the exact moment everyone else was starting to tighten up. In the closing strides, he blew past the entire field to win in 9.83 seconds. The wind reading came back legal at plus 1.3 meters per second, which meant the time counted for everything that mattered. It was a new Cameroonian national record and the fastest time in Africa this year. But more than that, it was a new Commonwealth Games record, breaking the mark that Trinidad and Tobago's Otto Bolden had set all the way back at the 1998 Kuala Lumpur Games, a mark that had stood untouched for 28 years. Kennedy crossed the line second in 9.85, a time that broke the Oceanian record and made him the first Australian man in history to reach the podium in this event at a Commonwealth Games. Ajayi held on for bronze in 990, with Leotlela finishing agonizingly close behind in fourth at 991, missing a medal by just 1/100th of a second. All four of them had gone under 10 seconds in the exact same race. Further back, Azamati crossed in 10:11 for 7th, and South Africa's Cheswell Johnson rounded out the field in 10.3. Afterward, Eseme admitted he was stunned by his own time, saying the rain was never something he could complain about, since every sprinter in that final had to run through the exact same storm. And this wasn't even the only piece of history made at Scotstoun Stadium that week. Canada's Cameron Rogers had improved the game's record in the hammer throw just hours earlier, and her teammate Ethan Katzberg had done the same thing in the men's hammer the night before. 3 games records fell at that stadium in the space of 2 days, and Eseme's run through the rain became the headline everyone walked away talking about. To understand how rare that final actually was, you have to go back to 2002. That was the last time a Commonwealth Games men's 100-meter champion ran under 10 seconds, when St. Kitts and Nevis sprinter Kim Collins won gold in Manchester with a time of 9:98. 24 years later, Glasgow didn't just produce one sub-10 performance. It produced 4 of them in a single race, in the rain, on a track that had been soaked all evening long. For Eseme, the win carried even more weight than the record itself. Cameroon had not won a single track medal at the Commonwealth Games since 2006, when Delphine Atangana claimed bronze in the women's 100 meters. Eseme's gold ended a 20-year wait for his entire country, and it capped off the finest season of his career. He had already claimed the African Championships title back in May, and this victory in Glasgow made him the 3rd fastest sprinter in the world this year and pushed him to 3rd on the all-time African performer list. He also became the first man in his career to run 3 sub-10-second 100-meter races in a single season. Not bad for a man who spent his early 20s standing between the posts instead of standing on a start line. What made this final so special wasn't just the time on the clock. It was watching a 32-year-old outrun a stacked field of the sport's brightest young talent in weather that should have slowed everyone down, and coming out the other side with a record that had survived nearly 3 decades. Kennedy proved he belongs among the world's best sprinters, and his silver medal alone rewrote his own country's history in this event. Ajayi and Leotlela showed that the depth in this event has never been stronger, with 4 men now boasting times inside 10 seconds from a single Commonwealth final. And Eseme reminded everyone watching that in sprinting, timing your run matters just as much as raw top speed. Even soaked to the bone, the crowd inside Scotstoun Stadium stayed on its feet long after the last sprinter crossed the line, because everyone in that stadium understood they had just watched something that might not happen again for years. The 200 meters still waits later in the week, and after a performance like this, every sprinter in that field will be walking back onto the track at Scotstoun with a target on Eseme's back. If races like this are exactly the kind of drama you come here for, stick around, because the Commonwealth Games still has plenty more finals left to deliver before the closing ceremony. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.